Welcome to the Embodiment Matters podcast with me, Erin Giesemann Rabke, and my beloved Carl Rabke. We don't have the luxury of living in ordinary times, but rather, we live in extraordinary ones, where the way we live in the next decade will make a huge difference in the future of life on planet Earth. We aspire in this tapestry of rich conversations drawn from a variety of wise perspectives and beings to share resources that can help you embody the wisdom, compassion, and skillful actions that are needed during these times. You can find out more about our classes, our 13-month depth training, Refugia, and sign up for our beautiful newsletter at embodimentmatters.com. We are 100% listener funded and ad-free and invite you to consider becoming a supporter of this podcast with a donation. You can find more at embodimentmatters.com/podcast.
Greetings, listener friends. So glad to have you here for another conversation in our Men of Depth and Soul series. And this is a sub-podcast series of the Embodiment Matters podcast that I host with my dear brother and colleague, Alexandre Joden. And in this conversation, we speak with Kedar Brown. And Kedar is going to be one of the guest teachers, along with psychotherapist and writer and soul activist Francis Weller, for our upcoming Men of Depth and Soul online group that begins March 24th, 2026. And Kedar is a ceremonialist, ritualist, rites of passage facilitator. He apprenticed with Stephen Foster and Meredith Little at the School of Lost Borders and apprenticed for many years with Malidoma Some. He's the founder of Rites of Passage Council.org. And we go so many places in this conversation. It begins with a beautiful prayer and invocation from Kedar, and you just get the sense of his presence and authenticity and his real sense of being a ripened elder, and how he has held space for these decades for other people to go through rites of passage and vision quests. And in our conversation, we go to many different territories of what it means to live in a good way, how to really become oneself, and the difficulty with all of the freedom and possibilities out there. How does one become who we're meant to be? And he speaks specifically to some of the challenges for men around that. We talk about what are some of the markings of adulthood and what happens in the absence of initiation when we're not kind of cooked or ripened into adulthood. We also speak about the importance of growing our inherent ritual intelligence. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. You can find more about Kedar and his work at ritesofpassagecouncil.org. And you can also find more about the Men of Depth and Soul class at embodimentmatters.com or at Alexandre and Alyona's website, healingbridge.com. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the conversation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Men of Depth and Soul with Carl Rabke and I, Alexandre. We've got Kedar Brown with us today, and we're just so grateful. I've known Kedar for at least 5 or 6 years now, and I'm so grateful that we can speak in the context of the world of men and men's work. And I'm curious, Kedar, if there's a way that you'd like to open this conversation, if there's a short prayer or something that you would like to bring in.
Why don't we begin with a little invocation? Always figure I can use as much help as I can get from the other side. So we'll invite them more formally, so they know they're welcome here. So I invite you to close your eyes and imagine yourself standing at sunrise in your favorite place in nature. And as you're facing the morning sun, we call upon those beautiful ones of new beginnings, of springtime and fresh new starts. That place where we see clearly for the first time every time, where we've let go of the old stories and can once again see the beauty and the mystery in each other and even in ourselves. So we call to all the good medicine people of the spring and invite you into this conversation, this circle, to awaken within each one of us that bone memory where you live as well, with much gratitude. Ashe. Now turning toward following the sun and following that sun's arc through the sky, we turn toward midday, toward the warmth of the sun, toward the season of summer, to the place where we manifest those visions that we've had in the spring and bring them into form, as Black Elk says, we make them real for the people to see. It's a place of action, beauty, and love unshadowed by thought, a place of courage. So we call upon the good medicine people of the summer, of the warm summer winds, and welcome you to this circle, to this conversation, to awaken within each one of us that bone memory where you live as well. With much gratitude, we welcome you. Ashe. And turning once again, we turn toward the season of autumn. Cooler nights in the lands where I live, bright colored leaves overhead and on the ground. That season of turning inward and downward, mostly toward the element of water, a place of healing and reconciliation. Also of nourishment and the harvest in autumn. And with that turning, we call upon the beautiful medicine people of the autumn breezes and winds and seasons, and how each of those seasons shows up differently in the lands that you live, and call us to the harvest, call us into community, call us into depth. And we welcome those beautiful ones, those medicine keepers of this season into this circle, into this conversation with much gratitude. Shay. And turning once again, we follow the sun until it moves around the planet. We move into the dark night, to the winter, this season of the dreaming, this season of release and letting go. Some say letting go so completely that spring knows how to show up because we let go enough. Also, the season of deep roots, the place of the elder and the story keepers, and sitting around those hearth fires on winter's nights. With much gratitude, we call upon the good medicine of this season to awaken within each one of us that bone memory where you live as well. With much gratitude, we welcome you. Ashe. And then turning toward the center of the wheel, looking skyward for all those star people, our star sisters and brothers and others, grandmother moon, grandfather sun. Well, thank you for shining down your lights upon us. Thank you, grandmother moon, for teaching us of balance and how to bring those things as men that we often hold in shadow and bring them into the light in the company of each other. And grandfather son, we thank you for those teachings of showing us as men how to show up every day, even when it's difficult, how to fall down 7 times and get up 8, always 8, so that when death does come to find us, it will find us standing. We call upon our star sisters and brothers and others and thank you for reminding us how to shine as a beacon of light by the way we live our lives so that you could see us from out there. So with much gratitude to the great mystery We call upon that medicine of the stardust that lives within each one of us, in our bones. And we thank you, Ashe. And lowering ourselves to touch the earth, Mother, Father, Earth, we call upon the place of home and belonging and connection, the place where you feel at home in your own skin, within your community, within your family, and within your own unique belonging to the world in the way that the gifts that you have to offer as men. That you stand firmly in that way of belonging, in service to something greater than the self, standing that in that initiated masculine that has been seasoned and alchemized by the fires of living, in that way of helping us remember who we are and who we came to be in this world as men. So with much gratitude to the great mother, to the great Father Earth, we thank you for reminding us of balance and teaching us that when we live out of balance, we live disconnected from you. With much gratitude. Ashe. And to the great center that exists everywhere all the time, to the ancestors, those that lived well and died well, and those that are bright and shiny that walk beside us in this life, to our upper world teachers and lower world guides and other allies and guardians and spirit helpers that walk along beside of us and help us remember the agreements we made before coming here about who we were coming here to be and what gifts of medicine we were coming here to offer. Much gratitude. We thank you for sticking by us. Even when we stumble and fall and have a hard time staying by ourselves and each other. With much gratitude, we welcome you, Ashe. And to the spirits of the lands on which you live, and to the First Nations peoples of those lands in which you sit now, with much gratitude to those ancient indigenous ones that left the seeds of remembering in the soil so that we may one day dig them up and remember too how to live in a good way in relation to all our people, human and non-human, living and non-living. With much gratitude, we thank you to the spirits of the land, the standing tall ones, the stone people, the medicine, plant medicine people, the spirits of the river, the little people on those lands, all the beautiful ones on the lands in which we live. We acknowledge you. We thank you. Ashe. Welcome you back to this circle. Often feel a little wobbly after doing that. Like now I'm this whole thing about two worlds gets vanishes, and now I'm finally got a foot in one world, and it's very thin.
Thank you for
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Kata, for that. I'm glad our conversation is not just the three of us in this moment also. Yeah, a shame.
Okay.
Yeah, it really touched me. What's ringing for me right now is when you said how to live in a good way. And to begin or to further our conversation, I'm curious if there's a myth or a story that's guiding you in this moment and that you're bringing into your work in the world to understand and I guess comprehend what our role is to play in this particular moment. You know, we're in October of 2025, where there's so much divisiveness and so much confusion, so much stimuli coming. I'm curious if there's a story or a myth that you would share with us that's guiding you.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a interesting and challenging time. This where there's breakdown of both culture and climate, um, and people reaching for some sense of security, um, in not so much the right places. I think um, it's almost the willingness to let go of fixed securities of things we can acquire or positions we can get to. I say the devoid of acquisitions and destinations. Those are the illusions that if somehow we can acquire this or get that. Um, so I'm most interested in the personal mythologies of each of the men listening to this, and we'll talk more about that. One of the a fragment of a story of and I can't quite remember the name, the woman who weaves the cloak of the universe is in a cave and she's weaving this cloak and it's about complete and then she realized she needs to get something in the back of her lodge, and so she sets the cloak down and wanders to the back of the lodge, and in that time a black dog comes into the cave and grabs a thread of the cloak and runs, and the whole thing comes unraveled, and she walks back into the room and quietly sits down and starts weaving again. And so there's this the unraveling and the weaving are cyclical. Um, it's like the word that gets thrown around sometimes, apocalyptic times. And apocalyptic means to awaken. Doesn't mean like zombies roaming the earth like you see on TV. It means actually to awaken. And so this unraveling of the thread time that we're in is calling for um, something beyond binary existence and solutions. Um, and I think it calls them more of an inward journey. There's no government that's going to save uh, people, and there's no figurehead that's gonna come up with that. Um, so how do we live? What does it mean to live in a good way? What is a good way for me, for you? Um, how is that? How does one discover that? Um, and it doesn't. Uh, Sometimes we interpret good to live in a good way means that would be easy, or that if I was living in a good way, things would be smooth and easy. Um, Actually, probably not right now. Or if it's smooth and easy, probably you're not as they say. There's a bumper sticker I saw in a car the other day. It said, "If you're not appalled, you're not paying attention." So, what does it mean to pay attention? As my native teacher said, the three most important things uh, are pay attention. And so, what is it? What is it that we are giving our attention to, and what is the quality of attention that we offer it? Because in this time where we're flooded with information that other sources want us to pay attention to, it can really throw us off balance. Um, and so, what is it that we choose to give attention to? And do we have the centeredness to offer it the quality of attention uh, that is needed? I think those are two different things. What we give attention to and the quality of attention we give it. And in particular, your own personal story, your own personal mythology, and how to um, awaken the memory of that. Um, that those old teachings that I've learned from some of my elders, and they say, you would have made agreements with the ancestors before coming here about who you were coming here to be and what you were coming here to offer, and you would have formed certain alliances with certain ancestral helping spirits that carried the same gift of medicine that you were coming here to bring. So you have to stay connected with them. So it moves through you in a good way, in a clear way. And so not to get distracted once you arrive here and go to sleep. And then your own personal mythology gets replaced by the current societal urgencies of what to pay attention to. And so I think to live in a good way means first to unplug um, from other people's um, kind of dictates or messages or what you need to pay attention to. So you can drop inside yourself a little more clearly, um, and remember. It's more about a remembering. And so, in the world that I'm moving a lot, rites of passages and initiations, this process of uh, remembering more clearly oneself. Um, and it can even be misleading when we tell um, even kids, well, you can do anything. Um, the idea of being, well, you came here to be and do something pretty specifically that's about you, and you can do that, and you can do that really well and be that really well. So you don't want to wake up one day and be living a life that is not the one you intended. And I think that happens a lot for men specifically. Not that it doesn't happen for women and others, but um, often men get the current mythologies of the society to ascribe to, um, and to navigate towards becoming successful in, that may have very little to do with who they are. Um, Simply devoid of any depth. Um, and then wake up in their 40s if they're lucky, and realize this is not where they belong. And so I want to talk about creating a life of belonging. Um, on our in a conversation before this, we were talking about that poem "Follow Your Name," and the story that preceded the writing of the poem was that meeting with the 17-year-old kid from Africa that I met here in a wilderness recovery center. Um, and he'd left his village when he was around 7 or 8 and ended up in Washington, D.C. in this country. And so the planned initiatory village life experiences that he was going to be looking at changed, and they become something very different in the inner cities of Washington, D.C. Um, and he ended up in front of me because he had gone down those initiatory pathways of drugs and uh, gang violence and all these other things. Um, and when asking him, uh, when you lived back in this village, did you have another name? And he thought for a minute. And he said yes. And he said when he was little, he went to live with his grandmother, and she gave him a different name. And I said, would you write it down on this piece of paper? So he wrote down this long thing in his native language, and then said, read that and tell me what that says. And what he read had images of landscape and animals and elements inscribed into it. And then he stopped, and I mean, even as I recall this, I can feel that tearfulness in me. He said when he was leaving his village, his grandmother said, grandson, follow your name. And so this idea that she had given him a name that described what she saw in him, um, and that the name itself was a roadmap. Um, and as I say, a lot of times, and especially in kind of popular spiritual circles where everybody's kind of waving their medicine name or some big name that they have as like a badge or a status. Um, it's say, when you get one of these kind of names, if it's a good one, you probably won't be able to speak it out loud. And the reason you can't is because you haven't yet lived into it. It's hard to say it. It's hard to hear it, let alone, say it so easily. If you can say it easily, it's probably not, there's not enough room for you to live into it. It's probably just a description of what somebody saw in you right now, as opposed to a roadmap for where you're going. And so that concept of, you know, names we carry, uh, being something that should be able to carry us into living a life in a good way, carry us into a life that um, serves our community, serves our people, serves, and as I say, the crossroads of where you're, um, the passionate offerings that you have, no matter how, uh, no matter what they are. It's like whatever those passionate things are within you, the crossroads of where your passion meets the needs of your people is where you're going to find your belonging. And it is also the same place of where you will find the most healing for yourself and also have the most healing to offer others. It's the same crossroads. I think we spoke some about this poem. I thought I was scanning for it. And I'll read it to you. It has so based on that story that I share with you, and it's actually a similar story of a Seminole Native young lady about the same age that told me almost an identical story of living with an elder of the same purpose. So based on those two teenagers, they were the inspiration behind this poem called "Follow Your Name." Pay attention. Pay attention. Be careful not to distract yourself from yourself by focusing on the obstacles in your life. Focus on the delivery of your medicine, not on the stories in your head where you recount your limitations and loss. Do not indulge in such self importance as a way to avoid taking responsibility for your medicine and the gift of healing that you came here to offer. You are the heroes and the heroines of your own story. And if you are not initiated into the bone memory and to the mythology of your own life, you will likely be living an existence that is not entirely your own. And the life you know you must live is the one standing just a few paces in front of you, looking back over its shoulder with eyes wide, waiting for you to remember. Apprentice yourself to yourself and walk to the horizon of your own dreams, the place where you live in the absence of those old stories, the place where the sharp edges of this unfolding moment demands your full attention. Where are you? I am here, you say. Who are you? I am this moment, you reply. Pay attention, pay attention. Stay humble and remain focused. Do not move through your life in such a way as to allow another to give you a name you have no belonging to. Pay attention, pay attention. Stay humble and remain focused. Do not move through your life in such a way as to allow another to give you a name you have no belonging to. And the words of that is a lot of information of many different teachings I've learned about what does it mean to live in a good way? What does it mean for a man? What is the difference between the uninitiated masculine and the initiated masculine? I want to pause there and hear some what's stirring for you guys.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just had like goosebumps and bone resonant yes to so many of the places that we just touched in with. I remember hearing that story of the woman in the cave probably about 15 years ago when Michael Mead was in town here in Salt Lake and just reflecting on how much more it seems like we're in that story than 15 years ago and the intensity of the unraveling and just witnessing how much that's drawing people into binaries. Like it seems like the pull to binary living is so intense on a certain level.
Mhm.
And also the commitment to reweaving something deeper is
Mhm.
also alive. I'm
Yeah, it's
I'm
almost a
curious.
sense that the dog has done this many times,
Yes.
and the
Yeah.
woman has rewoven the cloak many times.
Yeah. And it seems so essential to have a mythological framing of these times because it's so intense, and if you can stretch back that this isn't the first time that this has happened, it's not the last time, and like
Mm.
these cycles of unraveling and reweaving come together. I'm really curious. I'd love to continue on with where you were just going at the end there, around the markings of the uninitiated man and the initiated man, or the adult and the adolescence, because it seems like there's so many of the problems right now are from resulting from uninitiated men in positions of power.
Yeah.
And because many of us have not grown up with culturally intact initiatory process, you know, we piece it together through rituals, through gatherings. And like, what are some of the markings of someone who is resting in their adult presence? Or conversely, what are some of the markings that someone's not there?
Yeah, it's the first thing that comes to mind is often there's a restlessness, um, or a disparaging lethargy, like those two extremes, of numbness, distraction, of what one might see. Um, and this grappling for security in these bipolar positions of identity and belonging, as if we can just grab hold or figure out which one. And it's truly the tension of the opposites that brings us forth the third thing, which we don't know what the third thing is yet. But the tension of the opposites is what cooks the third thing.
Mhm.
Um, but it creates this illusion that somehow, if we can get this or get that, that will be the answer. And it's the alchemical fire of and pressure cooking of that. There's no resolve in either direction until some third thing emerges. Um, but when I think about the initiated masculine, the uninitiated, and what would that look like? Um, I can reflect on the kind of some of the evolutionary dynamics within this culture, this country, being that um, well, I'm reminded about Tai Chi. I used to study Tai Chi, and there's the saying yin before yang. And I thought, oh, that's why uh, the feminine often awakens first, and then the masculine comes next, yin before yang. And in that, in this country, there was awakening from more of a stoic, fixed, uh, masculine dynamic, kind of the pre uh, 50s and before then, even before the Industrial Revolution, going back, um, where roles were sharply defined and survival strategies based on living and what was needed was defined in certain ways of being for men. Um, and then the women began to wake up. We have in this country the women's movement back through the 60s. And there was also things happening like the Vietnam War, where our young men experienced a great betrayal of the elders and were sent and were essentially made into a blood offering
Mm.
for the status quo of the system. Um, and yet, when those young men returned and only found homelessness, they didn't return to home. They found isolation and homelessness, um, and at that time, the women's movement was unfolding and in full force. Um, and so, for a lot of men, they began to define their sense of identity through those movements, and it would in masculine dynamics and terms, it led to what we would say we moved from a hyper masculine to more of a hypo masculine. um, like the spiritual bypass.
Mhm.
And it's kind of ungrounded, masculine. It's an attempt to embrace more of a compassion and tolerance and well-being, but it moved almost to another extreme of a hypomasculine. So you have this hypermasculine, this hypomasculine energy, and then the men's movement began to take root with Robert Bly and Michael and some of those other guys, James Hillman, um, and look at what does it mean to be an initiated masculine? What is that process? Where one doesn't lose, where fierceness is not violence, and that one can be fiercely compassionate, have clear boundaries, have clear discernment, and also be very loving and supportive. Like, how do these things go together? And so the unfolding of the men's movement that was ignited back then was beginning to weave these two energies together of the hypo and the hyper masculine into what I frame and I've heard others frame as the initiated masculine. And so the uninitiated masculine would be one that um, never really severed the umbilical cord to the mother energy. And we look at mythologies and stories around that. That there's this severing that has to happen, and I see it a lot with teenagers that grow up in single parent homes with their moms. Um, and like where the mom is desperately trying they got them to the threshold, maybe they're 19 or 20 and the mom's desperate and there's a fierce holding on and a desire to let go and the kids holding on and desires to let and the tension of that um, ends up looking like a lot of different stories. um, but this idea that they get to this threshold that they can't be carried across by their mother or by the feminine in a way. It has to be a different energy. Um, and so in indigenous life, there is this for the young men, there was this severance factor that they were in some cases very dramatically and ritually pulled from the arms of mother or grandmother and taken off into the wilderness by uncles and brothers and um, other men in the village, um, and began to learn what are the roles and responsibilities, and more importantly, who am I in this arena of the masculine? Who am I, and what are my gifts? Um, and so we also know there's multifaceted ways of expressing the masculine. There's just not one old way or the binary ways. So like, that one could be an artist, a lover, a poet, uh, and the energy of a muse. One can have more of that kind of warrior, action-oriented energy that's discerning and has clear boundaries. One can hold the energy of more of the sovereign and holding space and blessing others, more of that sovereign energy of the or of the more of the magician, the wizard. I think about Moore's book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lovers, kind of these major archetypes of the masculine. And then with each one of those, there are facets of differences. Um, so the purpose of these initiatory rites of passage was to help young men begin to connect with that core. What is your mythology? Like in the poem, it says, if you are not initiated into the bone memory, into the mythology of your own life, you will likely be living an existence that's not entirely your own. It means you've adopted some uh, cultural ism to ascribe to. It's as I say, all the isms of a society become the replacements for one's personal mythology, and in that the role of the mentor uh, or teacher, as we call call them these days, was not to give you information, but was to draw it out of you. It's like, we're not going to give you a set of guidelines and principles, and here's all the things I want you to learn in order to serve this need that we want you to have. Um, we're going to look at you and like the grandmother and the elders with these teenagers, like, who is this and what is it that I see in them, and how do we draw it out? Because we need it.
Yeah.
Getting it out of them is essential to the survival of our species. Um, so learning had more to do with remembering than with filling somebody up with a set of information or certain kinds of information. And I always tell people when they say, "Well, how do I know when I'm remembering?" It's like, well, say if you end up in school to become an electrician or uh, you know a physician, when you're doing it, it won't feel foreign. It will feel like, I know this. This is There's something in me that I'm learning this language they have for it now, and how they talk about it now. But in me, I know this. Like, this is not doesn't feel like learning. This feels like remembering. Um, and it should have that feel to it. That means you've locked onto something here, that is a part of what you came here to offer. And so the initiatory experience was one of a severance from what was known, and then the initiatory ordeal. And those would look like many different things and could take different degrees of time, everything from a few, 4 days and nights to a year of the initiatory process, um, where one goes through um, the breaking down of the old uh, forms of identity and sense of security, and reconnecting them to um, in the old ways, it would reconnect them more deeply to the spiritual beliefs of that community as a source of guidance, and to reconnect them to an ancestral identity that was a source of their own genius, and to reconnect them to a relationship to the land. Like, these three things are woven together like sweetgrass. Um, and that um, coming out the other side of that was the idea that they became in service to some bigger thing, not personal gratification and or one of the isms that we're given in life, but there was a they came out with some sense of um, I'm in service to a vision that's feeds my people, and this is my particular way. I think and that can be another confusing thing for men of our times, with all the challenging things that are happening and the divisions that are happening. It's like, where do you begin? What do you do? I had this conversation with a man not long ago. He said, I'm just inundated with, like, there's so much to attend to, so many needs everywhere, so many places, and many that will um, be keep their heads in the sand unknowingly by just doing what they're doing, or get overwhelmed and feel like, what's the point? It's all going to hell anyway. Um, but remember, you didn't come here to do everything. Um, and so it's important that you not try and take on everything. But what is the thread that you're following, that belongs to you and that you belong to? Like, finding that. And no matter how significant or insignificant it may seem in the greater scheme of things, it is very, very important that you follow that thread, because you don't know the ripples. Every pebble that hits the surface of the pond will travel the whole pond. And every time you find that place of belonging, you're like dropping that pebble and making a difference. Um, so that initiated means that one then takes on a certain understanding of themselves and their role within the community of what they have to offer and what they're bringing, that serves some bigger picture. And in some popular circles of Native American wisdom, they say, let your decisions keep in mind the next 7 generations. Um, because part of the challenge of in the tension of opposites that we're in before the third way emerges, um, the tendency is to narrow the field of focus, both in how far out I focus, like what do I want now? What's going to serve me now? And also narrows the field of relational connection. So we get more um, guarded and more self-serving, to feel some sense of security. Um, and it happens on global scales. It's like breathing in, breathing out. I'm not saying that these are bad. I think they're part of a deeper methodology toward uh, the necessary need to unweave the cloak we've woven and start a new one. And that this kind of breathing, this movement from toward nationalism and protectionism, and this kind of squeezing of the resources, so that we have ours, and then there's more expansive, what we might call globalism. Like you can go too far in either direction, and so it is an expanding and a contracting that's happening. Uh, as I said earlier, the answer is not just one of those things, but how to navigate, how to breathe in and out. Um, and so those are some things that come to mind with your prompt.
Mm-hmm.
What else stirring out there?
I mean, for me, there's a lot that's stirring, and I wish we had, at least another 2 hours. Um, but yeah, I'm really appreciating how you're speaking of the prevalence of taking sides, and it feels like it's not a very popular it's not a very popular time to not take sides and just hold
Mhm.
the tension, like you're saying. And when I think of initiation, I think of the importance of ritual intelligence and cultivating that. And I know all three of us, we're very much into ritual and see the importance of that technology. And I'm curious if you could speak to, maybe in your own experience, how important it has been um, to bring in that ancestral technology of ritual that is in the bone memory of all of us as humans, as our original inheritance, and how to navigate that in a time where there is, in those polarized views, like um, just the murky waters of when people start talking about cultural appropriation, or people devalue, animist traditions, and how to navigate that, and how have you been able to navigate that? Because that's something that I continuously sit with. I know Carl does too, and we have relationships with different communities, and friends. They're friends. It's not, you know. Just people that we're paying to be in relationship with. And um, I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit more to the importance of that ritual intelligence, and how to cultivate this sense of kinship with people from many different walks of life. Like, we all have been born in and come from different cultures, and yet here we are, all coming together around a central kind of, or the commons of the soul, right? That's where we're meeting right now.
So I love the word ritual intelligence. It's for me it implies another intelligence outside the self that is cultivated through relationship with each other, and the each others is not just the human each others, but also the within the elemental and the natural world. Um, but this in this time of binary division, where the illusion of security appears to be this or that. Um, and it just and the intention of this or that is escalating, and that ritual intelligence asks us um, to surrender a certain knowing. Um, I like to say that ritual is nonsense, meaning that when you're in it, it is not for you to be making sense of. Because if you can make sense of it, then you're not in it. And so there's a way that ritual calls us to a, a present moment quality of awareness that is um, before beliefs are formed. It's just a sensual uh, awareness that happens in the moment. It's like when I've worked with people one time, and we were talking about this, and they said, "What do you mean?" I just pick up like a small stone and throw it to them, and they like suddenly catch it. And I said, "What were you thinking when that stone was coming towards you?" And they thought, well, I said, "Think, now, what were you really thinking?" They said, "Well, nothing." I said, "Right, you weren't thinking anything. You were paying attention." And so, this illusion that a binary belief systems will provide a security and an answer is the big illusion. It's the uncomfortableness with the sustained unknown that gives rise to the third thing. And ritual um, is that space. And we're just to use some of the known words around ritual in that context, where I talk about status ritual or radical ritual. Status ritual being that which is predictable. And if it's predictable, then nothing new is going to happen when you're done. Kind of like if you just go to church every day, but nothing really shifts. Status ritual is when you enter into um, an experience with a certain intention, but what happens in there is not going to be known. And in the rites of passage or the initiatory passage, we talk about the calling that brings one into it, and then the severance where there's a letting go of the old, and then there's the threshold phase. This is um, this is the place of connection with the unknown, the unknowable, and to be able to allow oneself to sustain that long enough so that something else can arise other than just another version of the old. And it's a certain discomfort there, a discomfort in uh, releasing um, yourself to the beliefs that you have, through your own resourcefulness and intellect and abilities, can navigate your way across this. You just had to think your way out of it. Um, and as we've had many people say, you can't using the same thinking that got you here. We're not going to get out of. We're not going to create something different. So this process of um, moving into ritual space where um, we allow ourselves to pay attention and offer a quality of attention um, to uh, experience and notice something that we can't usually see because we're too focused on something. So it is like the Vision Quest ceremony, the walkabout, or the mist walking in Scotland and Ireland, and the ancient Norse tradition of what they call sit out. It's all kind of going into the wilderness, going into a process of the threshold, to sit through the discomfort um, of what arises, so that something else can arise beyond that. And I think we're in the threshold alchemical fire right now, and the discomfort, the responses to the discomfort are to grab hold of something known, and that's where you get the binary tension happening. Um, but are there those willing to not grab to something known and sit through the discomfort until something emerges? Um, and it's interesting as I've watched kind of the evolution of at least in this society here in the U.S. where we move to this, we're moving more of a globalistic approach, and all of a sudden, relationships and genders are all of a sudden being fluid and non-binary, and I remember having a conversation with uh, one of the people that were standing in the position of the non-binary identity. And I said, you have come in to hold a particular tension in how, because they told me this story where they had run into somebody, they were on a hike, and the person wanted to like respond to them in a gender-oriented way, and they didn't know what to say. I said, so you are holding a position that does not allow people to grab hold of something familiar in relating to you. They can't. There's nothing to grab, and it creates a discomfort. Um, and yet, that is just one micro example of how that's manifesting in the world. Like, and then as a result, we go in the other direction. Where now that's getting rid of all of that again and more of this constriction and want to clear this and be this. It's like, oh, it's doing this movement. Um, but there's a ritual space, ritual intelligence can only emerge when we allow it through not applying our own meaning making, our own sense making to something that's happening, but sit in the place of paying attention um, before meaning. Like once you assign meaning, then the next thing is going to be beliefs, and the next thing is going to be judgments and protecting those beliefs and so forth. And so I think part of the challenge is now in doing that in relation to ourselves. You know, first that's the personal mythology, because there may be a lot of stories that you tell yourself about yourself that aren't your own, um, or that have been um, adapted through trauma or old ways of loving um, that have created a fixed story that you have come to know about yourself that has trapped you, or you've trapped another. You created a story about another um, or others that fix them in a belief story. Um, So, along with when I say ritual intelligence is nonsense, it means if you're making sense of it, you're not in it. And the other is, I always remember my elder teacher, Will Rockingbear, Cherokee elder, said he says, as I've gotten older, I try not to believe anything anymore. That way, I can pay attention to everything. Um, and I heard the intelligence in that. I would offer a little more than he offered me. I would say, be mindful of your beliefs and treat them. Beliefs are um, more like water. Meanings and beliefs are like water. They're fluid. They change as we change. They change. But once we try and grab hold of them and fix it, then we have to start protecting it, defending it, um, and all that begins to happen. And yet, beliefs they're fluid. I would say that beliefs are like blades of grass. There are billions. Grains of sand, there are billions of them. And think of them like tools. If your belief works for you, use it. If it doesn't work, get another one. There's lots of them. But we tend to treat beliefs as if they will offer us some sense of security. Um, at least if we can buy into the illusion until one day maybe the belief jumps up and runs away, and then we're left without it. And then we're paying attention. And we have nothing to hold on to. Um, so I think for men to examine, um, you know, is what am I in service to here? Um, and I think the answers can be accurately different depending on one's developmental stage that they're in when they ask the question. Um, so no, there's, uh, different ways that a young man would need to accurately uh, provide an answer to that for himself, different than say at middle age or an elder would respond to that. I think as we move toward elder, our expanse and awareness of time and relational space gets way expanded. So the elder um, has a sense of the seven generations and the impact around you know the global community. Whereas when we're younger, our awareness is more narrowed. Um, and so the uninitiated masculine be one that just remain narrowed in their sense of being able to see the long road ahead and also be aware of the relational expansiveness that's around them in terms of impact. So I think we're in one of those we're collectively, at least in this that I see around the world, and certainly in our culture, we're taking a big in breath, but eventually we're gonna have to breathe out again. Um, and the answer is not breathing out or breathing in. It's got to be something else between protectionism and globalism, as to use political ideologies. Um, I think it begins with the self, and to find your ground there, um, to to find someone in your life that appears to be uh, in the direction you would like to be going, and spend time with them.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
and I think that's the value of men coming together, and even in a virtual conversation or an in-person circle, um, that young men get to see all the different facets of masculinity and presentation and struggle. It's like I often say that the teenagers, when they express their struggles and they hear the 40-year-old express his struggles, it's the same ones. It's usually around money, sex, and work, or money, sex, himself. How do I reconcile these things? So for men, these often common themes don't change as they get older, but what the wisdom they can bring to them and the support they can offer each other to navigate those areas of one's life is helpful in coming together as men.
I love just the multi-generational learning. I just a few days ago got back from the Minnesota Men's Conference, and to have men in their 20s and men in their 80s and the wisdom that shines through each of those perspectives, I just kept finding myself like wishing that so many men could taste this, or so many women could witness how good men can be together
Yeah,
in a good way when the container is set.
that's an interesting thing that I've witnessed in mixed gender circles, is that when a ritual piece of work happens that evolves toward like a men's ritual piece that happens within a mixed gender circle, especially the men with the younger men, the women are like blown away because they've never seen it. And in particular, they relax because the men are attending to the young man, which they feel responsibility for, often like they're the mom. And it's like, and it's like, wow, they never been that even existed. I can't tell you how many circles I've been in where for women they're aware of the word matriarchy and patriarchy, and feminine and masculine. And in our society, there's nothing redeemable currently about the word patriarchy or masculine. And when I mention this word initiated masculine, they say, well, what is that? Um, I said, well, it's really no different than the initiated feminine. We could talk about the shadow side of that one too, and how they, conspire with each other, the two shadow sides, to keep the old story going. Uh, but just that fascination, yeah, and of men doing that work together and how that impacts the greater community. Uh,
Mhm.
I would say not only when women have witnessed men doing a piece of work with young men, when when women have witnessed men coming together to assist another man in his rage, and ritually be able to have him express it and give him a loving container that can hold it. It's like they've never witnessed it. They're often the recipient of such shadow expression.
Mm.
So there's so much, um, and yet in our culture, men are conditioned often to be isolationists and hold that within themselves or self-manage it. I think that's it's changed a lot even since when I was young. I was a child of when I was a child, I was growing up while Vietnam War was going on. And so I was old enough to watch the nightly news and the body counts, that they would compare body counts of men. What I call now, it looks like it was a blood offering.
Mm.
But I learned, I said, when I was 5 years old, I had figured out that when I get out of high school, I have to go over there. And a 5 year old, now I'm telling myself, if I have to go over there when I get out of high school, then if I have to kill people to get back here, then that's just what I'll have to do. And it's like, and I remember that it's like already the armoring
Mm-hmm.
starting to be kind of put on. And then there's the other side of, there are situations where that armoring would be necessary and those actions would be necessary. It's not like it would never be unnecessary. Uh, but it's just that, how do men how are boys raised? And, to attend to their own genius, vulnerabilities, and fierceness, not to leave out any of them, and help them embrace all of those parts of themselves in a healthy way. I think the fierceness often goes underground. It
Mm-hmm.
shows up in alcoholism or drug addiction or violence or workaholism. Uh, so it's yeah, how to ritual is that space. Ritual intelligence is, yeah, we can create space here to enable all the parts of you that even the parts you hold in shadow,
Mm-hmm.
whether that shadow is your genius and your brilliance, or that shadow is your rage, whatever that is, to be released, to come out, so it doesn't go underground or come out sideways, uh, or the illusion that men have to chase one of the particular isms of success in order to be sufficiently masculine. That story.
Well, I have one more. I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but I'm curious, Kato, if you could speak to parents who might be listening, because I know at adolescence there's that tendency, if there's not some intentional initiatory container, that there's the unconscious pull to initiation and brushes with death,
Mhm.
through drugs or sex or something, and what, because the uncles and the brothers aren't coming and whisking the boys off to initiation, like how to dance with that and how to support initiatory process for our youth. And I know our mutual friend Silas and I, we have boys that are a year apart, and it's been in the field since they were like 4 and 5 years old, that at some point this is going to happen. And we've had a series each summer. We've gone through a different phase with them, taking them out and just setting the container. And it's amazing to see, none of us having ever done this before, how much that deep current of ritual intelligence comes through when the space is set, when the intention is there. And just, yeah, any guidance you would offer parents of particularly kids at that adolescent threshold.
Yeah. So one is I've been a parent. I have actually two daughters that are now grown. The challenge of parenting teens in that's kind of the threshold phase of development is don't take any of it personal. that you will find that as a parent you have lost all your intelligence and wisdom, and you're just a complete embarrassment for them. That can happen. It's like don't personalize that. It's their way of beginning to somehow individuate and look for their tribe. But there's a natural tension that's gonna begin to a necessary tension that begins to happen. When mothers are raising sons, it'll happen there. It depends on the most present parent with the child. The tension's going to happen there because they're both wanting to move down this road that they see ahead of them, and yet are terrified. And you both want them to move down this road toward adulthood and terrified. What's going to carry them across? And you made a good point. So an initiation is something that I've come to believe is the initiatory impulse lives within every adolescent. That mean, it lives within everyone. It begins to be fired up in adolescence. And if it's not attended to intentionally, it will be attended to unintentionally. And you mentioned this idea of uh, the dangerous ways in which our adolescents self-initiate unintentionally. Um, and when I say dangerous, it's like there's this desire to brush up against death, brush up against danger. Um, Not simply, I mean, at one level, I said, well, they're just, their frontal lobe is not really online yet and they're making stupid decisions. Well, that's true too. But this desire to brush up against uh, death is a desire to brush up against the sacred, because that's where the sacred is found, in that place. And so initiation offers an intentional way for them to enter into uh, even perceived ordeals, and sometimes physical ordeals of going out. Um, but they're guided. They're guided by mentors and elders that know what's happening here at deeper levels. Um, they're not typically guided by the parents. It would be an uncle, a brother, a friend. When I've helped families create a rite of passage for their adolescent, they'll say, "Well, who are some, say for a young man, who are some men that this boy respects?" Um, and we'll do something on the front end with mom and dad, but after that, I want to know who are the men in this and that you feel good with. Let's involve them if we can.
Mhm.
So it'd be somebody within that village container that we don't really have anymore. So we have to recreate these experiences. And you mentioned, you were at the Mentone or Minnesota Men's Gathering, um, and just to sit in a field of men, for younger men to be in that experience, um, and the older men like look at them and know they have something that we need in this society that we haven't. We lived a life in order to generate the youth that now have answers that we couldn't get to. And so there's that wisdom of the elder to look at the young that way. The young men, it's like, yeah, we need to draw out of them what they're here to offer. Um, and yet the respect between them and so the elders can guide that process. If the youth are left to it by themselves, they will do it, but it won't be pretty, and it may not, and it tends to um, self-generated initiations, subconscious, what I call pseudo initiations, bind one's identity to a group consciousness that is self-serving. And you think about gangs, or you think about the military. I mean, all these other kind of subsects of initiatory, and some of them are important, some of them are necessary, but pseudo initiations that don't really awaken one to oneself awaken one to an allegiance to a particular belief system or uh, way of being in the world that serves that particular group.
Mm.
Um, An initiation awakens the young man to his own genius and to draw that out of him in its relationship to the greater community. Um, so it's all about awakening what is within the young man, or even in our day and age, any man, to draw it out so it can then be in service to the community um, at large. Remember the relational context is much wider, and the distance down the road is much further, not just immediate gratification. But you have that trouble in this culture of everything is immediate, and people expect to have immediate gratification. There's a lot of shadow side to that can happen, and the illusion that if it's not fast and quick, then there's no ability to give attention or a quality of attention to it until we can quiet and be still and realize that some of that fast and quickness is being stimulated by unresolved turmoil. And once that bubbles out and is shifted, then one can look underneath that, find more of what's there. So for parents, knowing that again, there's a natural tension that has to be there, and that's necessary. Um, and remember, the desire to do risky things is a desire to feel alive, and to connect with something. Uh, I would say even connect with the sacred, because that's where the sacred is. But it creates an aliveness, uh, and as part of the riskiness of youth is because the adults around them have so medicated themselves and become so numb, that the youth are bursting out just to feel alive. And the way you do that is there's a number of ways, but usually are often risky and dangerous. And but it will do it. You'll come out of and drug use. When I think about drug use in a broad context, I think different drugs create different experiences of aliveness. One is a very narrowed, present awareness. One is a very stimulated, active, both ends of the continuum. But it gives the person an experience of being alive. And so that's what they're seeking for. What is it that gives them that experience? And they're also seeking. I would say also parents, how important it is for your sons and daughters to receive what I call receiving a blessing of acknowledgement, um, of what somebody sees in them, particularly an older person. To say, I notice in you these qualities of this and this and this, and we really need those in our community. We really need those in the world now. And I just want to know, I want to let you know that I see these in you. Um, so there's a hunger to be acknowledged and to have what acknowledged be seen and named, because they may not see it themselves. Um, and that's part of the drawing it out of them when you name it. So I just want to tell you, um, and it's really powerful when it's powerful to come from a parent. Certainly, it's powerful when it comes from an adult that's not the parent. And if you ever want to try it on, um, there's a way of delivering it, that can be delivered to whether it's a teenager or an adult male. I learned this from teacher Rockingbear. I'll tell you a little story. Said one night he was it was late at night, and he and his wife were at Walmart, and he decided he would just go sit in the food area and just wait for his wife to finish shopping. He was sitting there, and a little ways away, so it was about like 11 o'clock at night, he saw this man who was dressed in a business suit, and he was there with his daughter, who was maybe like 6, somewhere around like that. And they said the daughter would run over, and every time the daughter would be there at the table, the man was like engaged, alive, present, totally focused with his daughter. And when she would wander off to kind of look at stuff, he noticed that the man was like exhausted. He's probably been at work all day. Don't know if he's doing the single parent thing or whatever's going on. But he noticed that when the daughter went away, his like he saw what the man was carrying. When the daughter came back, he's like very present. And the daughter walked away at one point, and my teacher Rockingbear was getting up to leave, and he walked over to the man and he said, "I want to tell you that I see you, and I see the kind of parent you're being here, and we need more people like you." And then before the man could say anything, he turned and walked away. He said, "The reason I turned and walked away is because I didn't want him to make it about me by saying thank you or anything. I just wanted to give him this message, this blessing." That's powerful. And so often when we say things to people, we hang out and get the return, "Oh, well, thank you," or yeah, and all of a sudden becomes about the one that said it. He said this. Just want to let you know, if you want to give somebody a blessing, just go give it to them and get out of the way, so they can't make it about you, and then they're left sitting with it. And also another beautiful way to drop a blessing in a young man's lap. It's just through observation and awareness to just go give it to them. And then get out of the way before they feel some pressure to make it about you and how to respond to you about that.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
I love that too. On that note, Kedar, as we begin to close our conversation, is there a blessing that you'd like to give to the men who are listening?
Remember who you are. Remember who you are. May you carry something precious and desperately needed in this world. And to awaken and remember what that is vitally important in these times. And not to compare it to anybody else. And so that no matter how small or insignificant it seems, it is very important that you bring that you offer that be your pebble that drops in the pond that may touch another miles and miles away or years down the road. Yeah, I just want to know that if each of you were sitting in front of me, I would look at you and say, there's something you came here to bring, and I'm really curious what that is, and how to draw that out of you. And once you identify what that is, or a part of it, you're not going to get the whole thing, right? You get breadcrumbs, you get pieces, and you follow the threads. That's what I say. That William Stafford poem called "The Way It Is," about following a thread. There's knowing and there's doing. Or is one of my favorite teachings from Rockingbear that I'll leave you with, when he said the three most important things are pay attention. And he said, I want to be careful not to become like the three chickens on the fence. And he said there were three chickens on a fence, and two of them decided to jump off. How many chickens are left? Usually people think about that. So, well, one. No. Two of them decided to jump off, so there was three. Because deciding to do something is not the same thing. And so that once you find that thread, follow it. It will lead to a life of greater awareness. To offer you no illusions that if you walk through that door, it just simply means life will get easier. Definitely will be more interesting. Just as my other teacher, Malidoma, used to say, at the crossroads, there are two roads. One is called good trouble and one is called bad trouble. So just walk down the road of good trouble. At least the trouble you're walking through is the worthwhile trouble to be in. I'm leave you men with that and wish you all well.
Thank you so much, Kedar. This has been a really nourishing conversation, and just blessings to you and your family and your community. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. And thank both of you for hosting this and gathering the men together and then sending this out. So much gratitude.
Yes, thank you for the good trouble, and we're really honored to have you come as a guest presenter in our next group. It'll be
Look forward to seeing some other guys in there.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, it's great if you want to share it with friends or post about it on social media. Also, you could make a donation to support the podcast or find out more information about our classes and offerings at our website, embodimentmatters.com.